At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, an HOA tyrant made a $2.3 million blunder that would send her to federal prison for 8 years. And it all began with bolt cutters meeting the wrong government vehicle. Snap! The bite of metal through my security chain cut the still morning air like a gunshot. That single sound marked the instant Bethany Kensington Wright shifted from HOA president to federal criminal in half a minute. While I was overseas dismantling drug cartels, this suburban queenpin decided my unsightly vehicle had to go. Her mistake? That Jeep wasn't mine. It was federal task force property holding $347,000 in classified surveillance gear. I'm not just a soldier. I'm a federal agent trained to dismantle organized crime. She thought she was towing some grunt's ride. She'd actually just committed federal offenses cartels dream about. What would you do if an HOA tyrant trashed your property while you were deployed? Drop a flag emoji and rep your state. Let's see how many patriots we've got here. My name's Marcus Tank Rodriguez, and 3 months ago, I thought inheriting Grandma's house would be a blessing. Instead, it became a war zone. Willowbrook Estates. A picture-perfect suburban nightmare where every house is beige, sprinklers hiss like clockwork, and the smell of mulch can't cover the stink of arrogance. HOA dues, $150 a month for community standards. Translation. Pay a petty Karen to make your life miserable. I'm an Army Reserve MP. Just tapped for a federal narcotics task force. Grandma Rose's place was supposed to be my anchor. Rent it out during deployments, build equity, honor the woman who raised me after a car wreck stole my parents when I was 12. That house still holds the scent of her tortillas and benet. Every creak in the floorboards is her teaching me right from wrong. Mijo, she always said, stand up to bullies but do it with honor. Then Bethany Kensington Wright stormed in. A 52-year-old realtor with a white Lexus SUV, ruler in hand to measure grass blades. 7 years as HOA president turned her into a suburban dictator. Her husband Carl sat on city council, making her untouchable. She's the type to issue violation notices for Christmas lights still up in January. 2 weeks into deployment, my inbox lit up. Violation notice. Accused of unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep, plastered with federal law enforcement insignia, was now an eyesore. Bethany twisted HOA covenants banning work trucks in driveways. But she ignored the facts. That Jeep carried $200,000 of surveillance tech for active cartel investigations. Encrypted radios, GPS trackers, covert cameras, equipment that can't be moved without authorization. Her fine? $50 per day, piling up while I was taking fire overseas. My sister Maya, a kind-hearted middle school teacher, tried to reason with her. She drove over with my deployment orders in hand, offered to tarp the Jeep. Rules are rules. Bethany snapped, glaring down at Maya like she was a stray dog. If your brother can't follow basic standards, maybe this isn't the right community for your family. Maya's call still haunts me, her voice breaking in Grandma's kitchen as she said, Tank, she threatened to put a lien on the house. She said Carl has friends in the school district, that helping you could cost me my job. That's when we saw the pattern. The Johnsons, he's a Marine, fined for a noisy motorcycle. Sarah Martinez, Navy spouse, cited for unprofessional garden decorations. Every military household in Willowbrook was under fire. And here's the kicker. Bethany was making up the rules. Maya dug through Grandma's old papers and found the original HOA bylaws signed in 1987. Government vehicles, military, law enforcement, emergency services were explicitly exempt. Bethany was inventing violations, betting residents wouldn't check. Neighbors whispered over fences but stayed quiet in public. She had created a reign of fear. With Carl's political influence shielding her, opposition seemed hopeless. But that's when it hit me. This wasn't about parking tickets or lawn decor. This was organized harassment of military families, backed by a crooked board. I could almost feel the grit of desert sand in my mouth as Maya's words reached me. Hear my abuela's voice telling me to fight the right way. While I was battling drug runners abroad, Bethany Kensington Wright was trying to erase my family's legacy with lies and intimidation. She didn't know it yet, but she'd picked a fight with the wrong federal agent. Bethany's next move came within 48 hours, pure suburban guerrilla tactics. A registered letter hit Maya's mailbox, demanding the Jeep be gone within 24 hours, not 48. Emergency towing authorized, citing health and safety hazards and neighborhood degradation. Total fiction, dressed up in legal jargon. CC to Carl's City Council office and local police. Maya called me again, voice trembling over the creak of those old wooden floors. Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver keeps eyeing your Jeep. Even Grandma's vanilla candles couldn't cover the fear in her tone. It was psychological warfare, wrapped in HOA stationery. Time for a counterstrike. I went straight to JAG, military lawyers who chew up constitutional violations before breakfast. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams took one look at the file, and her professional calm turned to fire. Rodriguez, this isn't an HOA issue. She just tried to steal federal law enforcement property. That's felony territory. Here's what most civilians don't know. The Service Members Civil Relief Act doesn't just guard against shady contracts. It shields deployed personnel from property harassment. And more critical, that Jeep isn't just mine. It's government property belonging to the United States. Williams filed a complaint with Base Command immediately, launching a federal liaison review. Bethany's little power trip had just hit the radar of people with real authority. Then came the personal twist. Maya dug deeper into Grandma's HOA records and unearthed a buried landmine. A 2019 letter from Bethany to city planning. It recommended blocking military housing assistance programs in Willowbrook because transient military populations don't maintain community standards. Translation: she'd been scheming to keep us out for years. Maya's hands shook as she scanned the brittle paper. Tank, she's been targeting every military family here. The Hendersons? Violated for their son's bike being left outside. The Washingtons? Cited for excessive noise because their baby cried. It wasn't incompetence, it was discrimination, pure and simple. This wasn't random HOA bullying. This was calculated discrimination backed by politics. Carl had a development project on the line. Luxury condos that needed HOA approval for zoning exceptions. Military families with government vehicles and unpredictable deployments didn't fit the glossy brochure image. Maya's teacher instincts kicked in hard. She started contacting other targeted households, compiling a record of every fake violation, each threatening notice, every intimidation ploy. Without realizing it, Bethany was helping Maya build a federal discrimination case. But Bethany wasn't done. She crossed a line that would haunt her forever. The sharp click of expensive heels carried over Maya's phone as Bethany strutted up our driveway for her inspection. She photographed the Jeep from all angles, pulled out a tape measure, and scrutinized every inch of the property. Your brother's service doesn't excuse community noncompliance, she sneered, her tone dripping with superiority. Perhaps your family should consider if this neighborhood suits your lifestyle. Code 4. We don't want you here. My counterstrike was immediate. I remotely activated the Jeep's GPS and surveillance systems, standard issue for task force vehicles. The data was damning. Bethany had trespassed on my property 17 times in 3 days, taking unauthorized photos of federal law enforcement equipment. That wasn't just harassment, it edged into espionage. When my supervisor, Captain Sarah Chun, learned a suburban HOA queenpin was stalking federal task force gear and threatening military families, her reply was short and sharp. Rodriguez, how fast do you want me to ruin this woman's week? The federal government was about to give Bethany Kensington a crash course in accountability. But her next stunt, born of desperation and suburban ego, nearly broke my family. 3 days after my JAG complaint, Bethany contracted exec-safe security to patrol for community compliance. 2 guards in a white SUV circled like vultures, logging my Jeep every hour as if it were a bomb on wheels. But the real damage came from their whispers. Maya called me sobbing over a shaky satellite connection, her voice cracking between desert wind and fear. Tank, they're telling people you're dangerous. that military vehicles are a threat to the neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson won't even look at me anymore. Hearing my sister cry while I was 8,000 miles away lit something cold and heavy inside me. They weren't just attacking me. They were shredding my family's name while I couldn't defend them. My retaliation had to be precise, but my tools were limited. On my next authorized call, I briefed Captain Chun about the private guards harassing a federal task force vehicle. Her answer surprised me. Rodriguez, we can't come down too hard yet. If we do, we'll confirm their narrative that your Jeep is dangerous. We need them to trap themselves. That's when I leaned on my hidden advantage, the Jeep's embedded surveillance tech. These vehicles carry more security hardware than most precincts. Motion detectors, infrared cameras, GPS logs, even automatic photos of anyone within 15 feet. Reviewing the footage froze my blood. Bethany wasn't just snapping exterior shots. At 1:43 a.m., the cameras caught her shining a flashlight through the windows, taking pictures of the dashboard and tugging at the locked doors. She wasn't inspecting anymore. She was trying to get inside classified federal surveillance equipment. But here's what chilled me the most. Bethany wasn't acting alone. The footage revealed her pointing out specific components of my Jeep to the security guards, who snapped meticulous photos of federal comms hardware. The neighborhood's fabric was unraveling, and Maya was the one paying. Parents at her school began whispering if a military family with security concerns should be teaching their kids. Her principal summoned her for a talk about community unease. I could hear the chalk dust and dread in Maya's voice during our next call. Tank, they're destroying my career. Bethany told the PDA that military families bring instability and risk. She's weaponizing my job against me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about my Jeep anymore. They were systematically dismantling my family's life, and I was powerless from halfway across the world. Helplessness tastes like sand and rage when you're sealed in a bunker surrounded by war machines while a suburban tyrant wrecks your sister's future. Bethany's guards escalated. The lead one, a washed-up cop nursing a power trip, confronted Maya outside the grocery store. Ma'am, we need to discuss your brother's military activities, he said, blocking her path to the car. That vehicle contains equipment that could endanger the community. We need to know what operations he's running out of your home. Maya, sharp as ever, thumbed her phone to record. Are you implying my brother, who's serving overseas defending this nation, is some kind of threat to American families? Her voice steady, though I could hear the tremor. He leaned closer, crowding her. Military families sometimes bring problems. PTSD, weapons, surveillance gear. We're protecting the neighborhood. They were painting me as a ticking time bomb, a textbook smear of veterans disguised as safety. But the recording captured gold, the guard admitting they were probing surveillance equipment in my Jeep. That was evidence in a federal espionage case. My retaliation came from a direction Bethany never anticipated. Captain Chun contacted the Federal Licensing Bureau overseeing ExecSafe, alerting them that their guards were spying on classified equipment. Within hours, the SUV vanished. The company now faced federal scrutiny for espionage. Bethany panicked. She fired off frantic complaints. Police, fire, code enforcement, even animal control, each filing another line in the paper trail of her obsession with federal property. The conflict was spiraling, and I was still 8,000 miles away, while my family bore the brunt. But Bethany had no clue she'd triggered federal tripwires that would collapse her suburban empire. Her meltdown peaked at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, captured in HD by Maya's cameras. The sound seared into memory, clang, 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 bolt cutters chewing through my lock. Each snap echoing like gunfire in the morning calm. Maya's panic call jolted me awake in the tent. Tank, she's cutting your locks. She's got a tow truck, and she's stealing your Jeep right now. Through her lens, I watched Bethany Kensington Wright commit felony theft of federal property. Hair wild, bathrobe half-tied, waving cash at Discount Dave's towing. But the driver, seeing the federal decals, backpedaled fast. Lady, that's government property. I'm not touching it. It's abandoned property. Bethany shrieked, spit flying, insisting she had HOA authority to remove community violations. That soundbite, caught on 3 cameras, became Exhibit A in a federal theft case. I hit the emergency line to Captain Shun, triggering protocols for theft of government assets. Within minutes, U.S. Marshals were racing to Grandma's address, lights blazing. Meanwhile, my Jeep's hidden systems were logging every move. GPS pings, photos, kill switch alerts. The instant Bethany clipped the lock, Homeland Security databases lit up across 3 states. And then came her fatal blunder. After the tow truck bolted, she installed new locks on the community gate, trapping a federal task force vehicle and blocking law enforcement access. If he wants his military truck, he can follow HOA procedures, she screamed, rattling the keys. Service doesn't put him above community rules. The helpless fury in my chest burned as I watched this self-crowned suburban warlord steal federal equipment while Maya filmed. The stench of diesel and fear all but seeped through the phone. Knowledge check. Tampering with federal task force vehicles isn't petty theft, it's national security. Locks cut, GPS triggered, Homeland Security notified. It escalates instantly to potential terrorism charges. The tide turned when Mrs. Patterson, watching from her window, witnessed Bethany's tantrum. A woman who'd buried 2 military sons wasn't about to let an HOA dictator torment another soldier's family. She rallied every neighbor, every veteran nearby. By 10 a.m., Grandma's yard was surrounded by locals forming a human barricade around the Jeep. "This ends now," declared Tom Henderson, a 72-year-old Vietnam vet. "You want that Jeep? You go through 30 veterans first." Maya's voice was steadier when she called back, bolstered by the wall of support. "Tank, you wouldn't believe it. The whole block is here." Mr. Henderson's waving his flag. Mrs. Chen's making coffee. "They're not leaving." Bethany's answer? Double down with hysteria. She bombarded agencies with false reports, veterans forming armed militias, fire hazards for military gear, fabricated code violations, even animal control nonsense about attack dogs. Each lie was a new federal crime. Filing false reports against military families and federal property is no joke. The breaking point came when marshals reached the gate and discovered Bethany had padlocked them out. That was obstruction of federal justice. Marshal Jennifer Torres, a hardened operator who'd hauled in cartel bosses, stared at the gate, her expression shifting to predator mode. "Ma'am, you've obstructed federal agents investigating theft of government property. Unlock this gate or face additional charges." Bethany's reply was her undoing. "I don't recognize federal authority here. This is HOA jurisdiction. You have no power." She had just declared war on the United States in a bathrobe. Game over. 72 hours later, I landed back in the States, still tasting grit and adrenaline. Maya sat in Grandma's kitchen, hands shaking over a stack of papers. "Tank, you need to see this before the feds arrive." She spread manila folders across the table. 5 years of HOA financials, minutes, correspondence. Buried in the pile was the smoking gun, a contract between Kensington Urban Holdings and Eastbrook Development, dated 6 months before I inherited the house. The header froze my blood. Willowbrook Estates Acquisition Strategy, Phase 2 Implementation. "Tank, it was never random harassment," Maya whispered. Teacher instincts turned sleuth. They were clearing out families for a massive condo project. The paper crackled like brittle bones as I held it. Carl's company had pre-sold 47 homes they didn't even own, including Grandma's. "Check the target list," Maya said, tapping an appendix that made my fist clench. Every military family, every senior, every resident too weak to resist bureaucratic bullying, all flagged for acquisition. The Hendersons, the Martinez family, Grandma Rosa, each name marked in a campaign to force fire sale prices. But then came the revelation that flipped everything. Bethany hadn't just abused the rules, she had forged them. Maya laid out the authentic 1987 HOA bylaws, the originals, not Bethany's counterfeits. Military vehicles weren't prohibited at all. They were explicitly protected under federal compliance statutes. Tank, she fabricated covenants and counted on fear to keep people quiet, Maya said, her voice sharpening with conviction. But that's not all. The financial records told an uglier story: systematic embezzlement. Over 3 years, $184,000 siphoned from HOA accounts in a Carl's development company through bogus consulting and phantom improvement projects. Knowledge nugget: when board members funnel community money into private ventures without approval, and those schemes involve interstate communications, that's mail fraud. When it forms a pattern of organized theft, that's RICO territory: racketeering, conspiracy, organized crime, carrying 20-year sentences. The air in Grandma's kitchen carried the mix of Maya's fierce sweat and raw resolve as she dropped the final bombshell. Tank, I think they killed her. She handed me violation letters issued during Grandma's final hospice weeks. Citations for property neglect, threats of legal action against a woman who couldn't leave her bed. Each letter spiked her blood pressure, the nurse said. She kept asking if we'd lose the house. I thought her last words, "Mijo, don't let them take our home," were pain-induced rambling. They were warnings. In that moment, Maya was no longer the soft-spoken teacher being cornered by HOA tyrants. She was a soldier armed with evidence and righteous fury. Tank, this isn't about your Jeep anymore. This is organized crime dressed up as neighborhood governance. They've destroyed families for profit. The balance hadn't just shifted, it had detonated. Federal prosecutors were about to inherit a RICO case loaded with fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and elder abuse. But for me, the revelation cut deeper. I wasn't fighting for a driveway anymore. I was fighting for Grandma's honor and every family crushed under Bethany's empire. The battle had turned personal in ways Bethany never could imagine. Within 48 hours, Grandma's living room had become a war room. The irony hit like a gut punch, plotting the downfall of suburban tyranny in the same space where she once shouted at telenovela villains. Maya wasn't just my sister anymore. She was a field commander with lesson plans swapped for war maps. The timid teacher had vanished, replaced by a strategist running coordination between federal agents, veteran allies, and furious neighbors. The scent of burnt coffee, tension, and piles of legal paperwork had replaced Grandma's sweet vanilla candles for good. Captain Chun arrived with 2 federal prosecutors and enough legal power to topple a government office. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez spread Maya's evidence across the table, shaking her head in disbelief. "Rodriguez, I've handled cartel money laundering cases with less documentation than this." That's what she explained, something that pulled my training into sharp focus. During my federal crimes course, they drilled us on RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Back then, I thought it was reserved for mobsters. But when suburban tyrants commit organized fraud and discrimination across state lines, they qualify as federal organized crime. Maya's files proved a pattern of racketeering, embezzlement, fraud, civil rights abuses, all tied to Carl's city council power and Bethany's HOA rule. Their development deals crossed state borders, locking it into federal hands. The growing circle in Grandma's living room looked more like a resistance cell than a neighborhood gathering. Tom Henderson rallied his Vietnam vet brothers, 12 men who had lived through real wars and weren't about to be cowed by suburban bullies. Mrs. Patterson added surveillance photos, clear images of Bethany and Carl meeting after midnight at the community center. Maya's teacher union brought a surprise weapon: media expertise. Teachers are experts at breaking down complex issues for families, and they were ready to stand with military households facing harassment. Maya's voice, now sure and commanding, filled rooms once softened by Grandma's humming of Mexican lullabies. Watching my younger sister direct federal lawyers and neighborhood volunteers loosened something in my chest I hadn't realized was clenched. For her, the financial fight was personal. She pored over the records at night, her teacher's instinct catching patterns like she did with students who copied homework. This wasn't just theft, it was betrayal, and it cut at her sense of fairness. "Tank, remember Mom balancing the family budget on this table?" Maya asked, tapping spreadsheets that showed $184,000 missing from HOA accounts. She taught us that stealing from families is the lowest crime. Forensic accountant Jennifer Walsh detailed Carl's operation. flipping properties to out-of-state buyers before coercing current owners to sell. I'd seen scams like this in my financial crimes training, promises of future ownership, collecting money first, then rigging circumstances to deliver later. Maya had dug up emails between Carl and Eastbrook Development laying out displacement timelines for homes they didn't even own yet. The violation wasn't abstract. They had schemed to take Grandma's house before she had even passed away. The DIY surveillance system turned our block into an intel hub. Hidden cameras, patrol rotations, encrypted radios. Patterson's front window became a watch post, Henderson's garage became an equipment depot, and Maya's house ran communications. Her recall election plan drew from her civics lessons. She told her students democracy works only when citizens engage. Now she lived it. Most residents didn't know HOAs could be ousted with petitions, usually needing a quarter of homeowners to spark a special vote. Within days, Maya gathered 67% signatures, uncovering proof of racial harassment, veteran targeting, and cruelty toward the elderly. The taste of triumph mixed with desert grit still clinging to my boots. Maya's union contacts launched the media angle. Stories of military family discrimination spread online through veteran networks, catching Congress's eye. 3 lawmakers called for federal briefings on HOA abuse. The insurance scams surfaced through Maya's instincts. Bethany had filed bogus claims, blaming my Jeep for damages that never existed. I knew prosecutors loved insurance fraud because it was easy to prove and carried weighty sentences. Civil rights attorneys stepped in after reviewing the discrimination trail. Veterans' rights violations and elder abuse brought added federal protections with heavy penalties. Maya's election as interim HOA president came unanimously at an emergency meeting. Her first act, freeze all accounts for federal review. Watching her wield the gavel in the very hall Bethany used for intimidation was cold, perfect justice. The fight had grown beyond family revenge. It was turning into a model case against HOA corruption, military discrimination, and abuse of authority. But Carl and Bethany had no clue how close the walls were closing. Bethany's panic boiled over at 3:17 a.m. when Mia's night vision cameras caught her crouched in our backyard, burning HOA financial records behind Grandma's shed. The acrid mix of smoke and lighter fluid drifted through Maya's bedroom. Through the window, Bethany looked like some desperate suburban witch hunched over a metal bin feeding flames with shaking hands. "Tank, she's torching evidence in our yard," Maya whispered into her phone, eyes locked on the scene. "She's actually burning documents while under federal investigation." The federal teams have been quietly tracking her for weeks, logging every slip into criminal panic. Watching her destroy proof with her own hands, that was poetic justice. But her unraveling escalated. Maya's car was vandalized the next morning, 4 tires shredded, military scum sprayed across the windshield in dripping red. The crunch of broken glass under Maya's feet hardened something inside me. The feeling was one I knew well from combat. Rage when enemies struck those you couldn't protect. Only this wasn't a war zone abroad. This was suburban terrorism, aimed at us. I counted the only way I knew. One call to Captain Chun brought a change in the battlefield. Federal protective details were quietly assigned to Maya and key witnesses, agents blending into joggers, coffee drinkers, everyday faces. Bethany's spying was now being tracked by professionals with clearance to arrest. The neighborhood rallied too. Henderson set up veteran patrols, their boots echoing on the streets at 2 a.m., making her late-night moves impossible. Patterson's kitchen turned into a control room, calendars marked with patrol rotations, coffee pots brewing beside stacks of notes. Carl's arrogance surfaced in recordings Mia found of city council meetings, his voice pressuring the police chief to dismiss complaints from military households. Hearing his smug words through a laptop made my training flare up again. This was textbook conspiracy, a public official misusing office to deny citizens' rights. These military people bring instability. Carl's voice dripped with disdain. Their vehicles, their schedules, their problems ruin property values. That recording became Exhibit A in a federal conspiracy file. Bethany's downfall sped up when surveillance caught her trying to bribe Maya. Federal wiretaps recorded her outside the grocery store, perfume barely covering her panic as she pushed an envelope of cash forward. "This is $50,000 for your family," Bethany stammered. "Military families belong in better places anyway. Take it. Find somewhere more suitable." Maya, ever the teacher with instincts for evidence, kept her phone recording while federal agents listened in from unmarked cars. From my own training, I knew witness bribery attempts carried a hard 5-year minimum. But Bethany wasn't done piling on felonies. She actually tried bribing federal agents. Using a shady private investigator paid with stolen HOA money, she offered them cash to make the military problem disappear. The stupidity was almost comic. She assumed agents were as crooked as her suburban kingdom. But federal agents don't just reject bribes. They document them, record them, and fold them neatly into case files that guarantee decades in prison. Carl's allies began jumping ship fast. The mayor cut ties. City council members demanded Carl step down. His development firm's stock tanked as corruption headlines spread statewide. No amount of overpriced cologne could hide his fear during emergency council meetings. He tried painting federal investigators as military agitators out to ruin local businesses. Every abuse of his office was captured by corruption specialists who'd taken down bigger names. Then came the death threats. Notes under Maya's windshield, warped voicemails warning teachers sometimes meet accidents if they don't shut up. Her voice cracked when she played them back, and something protective roared awake in me. But my response was cold and federal. Witness threats trigger FBI terrorism units. Every note, every distorted call was traced using handwriting, phone logs, and forensics straight out of TV drama. Bethany's next desperate move was filing false reports, telling police Maya was unstable and plotting violence with armed militias in Willowbrook. But making false claims about federal witnesses during open investigations isn't a neighborhood spat. It's obstruction of justice with terrorism enhancements. The beauty was in watching Bethany destroy herself piece by piece, while federal agents methodically build a case that would cage her for life. Her smear campaign swung into overdrive, targeting Maya's school. Anonymous complaints poured into the district office, accusing her of radicalizing kids with anti-government propaganda and endangering civilian families. Maya's broken voice on the phone nearly split me. "Tank, they're trying to kill my career." The familiar smell of chalk dust, now mixed with fear. Parents demanded she be fired. The principal dragged her into emergency meetings over ties to unstable veterans. Bethany had hired Morrison and Associates, the same PR spin doctors used by disgraced politicians. They painted Maya as a PTSD-ridden danger who brought military threats into peaceful suburbs. The lies weren't like foreign propaganda. These were tailored attacks meant to wreck families, not missions. Maya's prep work, though, was months deep. She logged every threat, every falsehood, every strike on our reputation. And then my training lit up. Bethany wasn't acting alone. She'd linked up with HOAs across 3 states, pushing model military disruption policies. This wasn't harassment. It was nationwide discrimination. My civil rights training told me, multi-state conspiracies trigger RICO. Coordinated rights violations equals organized crime. Maya's counterstrike was devastatingly elegant. Her students and their parents staged a support rally, filling the school lot with flags and signs. "We support Teacher Maya. Military families defend freedom." Third graders chanting, "Thank you, Tank's sister," echoed off the playground walls she'd guarded for years. Those kids grasped justice better than adults. But Bethany escalated to madness, hiring private investigators to stalk Maya's life. They tailed her to school, photographed her teaching, tracked her shopping, even her morning jog. The sound of camera shutters outside, classroom, windows lit something primal in me. Maya found bugging devices during a safety check. 3 hidden recorders, all traceable to Morrison and Associates via federal purchase trails. Federal law is crystal clear. Unauthorized surveillance triggers the Wiretap Act, with 20-year sentences when tied to witness intimidation. Planting devices in a teacher's car? That drag Homeland Security in with terrorism enhancements. Captain Chun didn't hesitate. He handed Maya's case to FBI counterintelligence. Overnight, Bethany's petty war became a domestic terrorism investigation handled by people who hunt spies. The story went national once military advocates got involved. Congress demanded answers about systemic HOA attacks on service families. The blaze of attention was gasoline on Bethany's fragile empire. Fox News, CNN, Military Times, everyone wanted Maya's story. Carl's career imploded live on air when agents raided his office mid-council meeting. Cameras rolled as boxes of evidence were carried out while he sat frozen. Humiliation dripped off him. Then Morrison and Associates made their fatal misstep. They published a bogus community safety report claiming military families raise crime, domestic violence, and drug abuse rates. Fabricated stats, false veteran crime numbers, pure incitement against a protected class. Maya's eyes hardened as she read it. Tank, they just attacked every military family in America. Publishing lies to drive discrimination isn't PR, it's a federal hate crime. Coordinated across states, it became racketeering with civil rights conspiracy charges. The investigation exploded into 17 states as other families came forward, armed with Maya's same kind of documentation. Her methods became the blueprint for prosecutors taking down corrupt HOA networks everywhere. Military spouses nationwide wrote in with their own stories of harassment, fraudulent fines, and forced sales. Maya's voice, steady and strong, now filled the room's grandma, once used for bedtime stories. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a national advocate. They thought they were fighting one teacher and one soldier, Maya said, surrounded by binders of evidence. But they declared war on every family that serves this country. The reckoning was set, and it was going to be federally spectacular. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never held a scene like this. Packed to the walls, fire codes shattered, federal agents lining the perimeter, cameras from 6 news stations rolling, military families from 3 states seated together for justice. The air was sharp with coffee, sweat, and electric anticipation. Congress members filled the front row, notebooks open for hearings to come. Bethany strutted in late, Lexus gleaming, but walked a gauntlet of protesters carrying prosecute HOA terrorist signs. Her heels clacked against asphalt, drowned out by veterans chanting, "Thank you for your service," to Maya, not her. Carl shuffled behind her, shoulders slumped, the look of a man already sentenced in his own mind. Maya took the podium. Gone was the frightened teacher. In her place stood a national advocate with Congress and a U.S. Attorney's Office at her back. For 5 years, these people waged war against military families. She began, her words booming across live streams. They fabricated laws, stole funds, and ran coordinated campaigns that betrayed every value this country stands for. Applause thundered through the building, rattling glass. Federal prosecutor Rebecca Martinez stepped forward, boxes of evidence in tow. Her voice carried the kind of authority criminals can't ignore. The United States has compiled overwhelming proof of conspiracy, property theft, civil rights violations, intimidation, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. Each charge hit like a hammer. Then Henderson, his Vietnam-worn voice breaking, spoke for the veterans. My son served 3 tours protecting freedom. These people spit on that sacrifice for profit. Today was the day they realized how wrong they'd been. But the real mic drop belonged to me. I walked to the podium, feeling Grandma beside me, her voice echoing in memory. Stand tall against bullies, mijo, but do it the right way. And this was the right way. Bethany Kensington Wright thought she was cutting into some soldier's private jeep. I began, my voice slicing through the silence. What she actually did was tamper with an active federal narcotics operation, sabotage classified surveillance, and steal property belonging to the United States government. The room gasped as one, air sucked out like a vacuum. That Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It carried $347,000 worth of surveillance gear tied to cartel investigations in 4 states. By cutting those locks at dawn, Bethany hadn't just committed theft. She'd interfered with national security operations that shield American neighborhoods from drugs and protect families. Her face drained gray, the dawning horror of her own federal-scale idiocy written clear. She wasn't a suburban tyrant anymore. She'd crossed into a national security offender. But her true crime wasn't the stolen vehicle. My voice turned sharp, measured, judicial. Her true crime was orchestrating a war on military families, hijacking local power to rob the very people who trusted her, and believing suburban privilege stood higher than federal law. The crowd roared to its feet, applause mixing with chants of "lock her up" and "justice for our heroes." The moment belonged to federal authority now. U.S. Marshal Jennifer Torres stepped forward, practiced and steady, radiating the kind of power that can't be bribed. She slid handcuffs from her belt, her tone iron. "Bethany Kensington Wright, you are under arrest for theft of federal law enforcement property, conspiracy to violate civil rights, embezzlement of HOA funds, witness intimidation, and obstruction of federal justice." The snap of steel echoed through microphones as cameras zoomed in on suburban power being stripped bare. Bethany's sneer faltered into shock, the dawning awareness that her paper kingdom had collapsed. Carl, true to form, bolted for the back exit, but federal agents were already there. His capture lacked flair, but dripped satisfaction. The lesson was unmissable. When local corruption touches federal property, the consequences are delivered with brutal certainty. Maya's interview streamed live. Her evolution from frightened teacher to fierce advocate laid bare. "This proves," she told millions, "that organized harassment of military families is not a zoning dispute. It is a federal crime. And no homeowners board sits above the Constitution." For the first time in years, victory felt tangible, sweeter even than Grandma's cooking. Justice baked into every bite. 18 months later, I stood in Grandma's kitchen holding the sentencing report, her imagined voice whispering, "Justice served right, mijo." Bethany earned 8 years in federal prison, no parole, plus $647,000 restitution to families. The judge's words echoed into legal history. "Your systemic harassment of military families constitutes domestic terrorism dressed as community governance. This court will not allow suburban tyranny." Carl took 6 years and a lifetime ban for public office. His empire crumbled, paying $3.2 million in settlements, restoring dignity to families who'd endured their abuse. Yet the greater victory wasn't punishment. It was renewal. Maya was elected HOA president, rewriting bylaws that became the national template for military protections. The stale stench of corruption gave way to fresh hope as she unveiled the Willowbrook Military Family Bill of Rights. Bethany's seized house became Veteran Memorial Park by unanimous community vote. Children now swung where tyranny once reigned, laughter replacing ruler-measured lawns. The Rodriguez Foundation for Military Family Rights grew from Maya's passion. She left teaching to champion families across America, her methods becoming FBI training standards. Grandma's house transformed into mission headquarters. Kitchen table replaced by maps, case files, and meetings with congressional staff. Federal law changed. HOA boards were forced into transparency. The Tank Rodriguez Act guaranteed federal oversight, treating systemic harassment as organized crime with decades of prison time attached. Communities learned the hidden truths. Service members hold protections stronger than local ordinances. Corrupt boards can be recalled by 25% of homeowners, and harassment counts as conspiracy under RICO. By the time our story went viral, more than 400 similar cases surfaced, triggering federal probes and protecting thousands. Property values soared 31% post-cleanup, proving integrity attracts investment. Maya's journey to national advocate brought joy none of us saw coming. She married Captain Sarah Chin's brother, David, a Navy vet drawn to Willowbrook by our victory. Their reception filled the same center where justice had once thundered. I found my own happiness with Elena Martinez, the prosecutor who'd built our case. She transferred nearby, and we bought the house next to Grandma's. Each morning in this neighborhood feels like justice lived out loud. The Rodriguez Scholarship, seeded with settlement money, has already sent 23 military kids to college. At each graduation, I see living proof that one family's courage can ripple into generations. Mrs. Patterson, now 91, still cuts ribbons at every park opening, her voice soft but sure. Your grandma always knew you'd do something special. She just didn't know you'd save the whole town. The culmination came at our first annual Freedom Day. Hundreds of military families filled Veteran Memorial Park, swapping stories of victory over corruption. Barbecue smoke mingled with laughter, pride, and the hum of community, no longer afraid. Maya's hand in mine, I watched families gather safely on ground Grandma once guarded with quiet faith. My favorite moment happens not in speeches, but daily, seeing the flag